He has a phone. It works fine. The battery holds, the screen is intact, notifications are on. He just never opens the apps. Not because he doesn't know how. He ran a Unix terminal in 1994 on a machine that smelled like warm plastic and ambition. He figured out the internet before most people knew it existed. He is not confused by technology. He is suspicious of it, which is a different thing entirely, and the difference matters. Let's call him Marcus. Marcus is 53. He works in infrastructure, the unglamorous kind, the systems that keep hospitals lit and water moving in the right direction. He has opinions about copper versus PEX piping that would bore you to tears, but if you listened long enough, you'd realize he was also talking about loyalty and which things hold when everything else fails. Marcus has had a Facebook account since 2008. He has posted exactly once. It was a photo of a crawl space he'd just finished rewiring. He got 3 likes, 2 of which were from people who didn't understand what they were looking at. He never posted again. Not dramatically. He just didn't see the point. The question most people ask is, what's wrong with him? Why does a functioning adult with opinions and a sense of humor and people he actually cares about choose to be invisible in the one place where everyone else insists on being visible? That question, as we'll see, is pointed in the wrong direction. Because the more useful question is this: what does Marcus know that the rest of us are only starting to figure out? And there's something else underneath that, something we'll come back to, about what this silence costs him and whether the math still works. A quick piece of context first. Generation X, the cohort born roughly between 1965 and 1980, came of age in a specific window that no other generation will ever occupy. They grew up without the internet. They became adults during its arrival. That sequencing matters more than almost any other developmental fact about them. They watched the digital world get built from raw materials. They were old enough to evaluate it before it evaluated them. And what they evaluated, those who were paying attention, was a distribution system for performance. Not connection, performance. That's the word Marcus would use if you caught him in a rare candid moment, which requires approximately the same conditions as spotting a snow leopard in the wild. You need to be patient, non-threatening, and genuinely uninterested in filming it. The social media economy runs on visibility. The algorithm rewards volume, frequency, emotional volatility, and the kind of relentless self-presentation that Marcus found exhausting before he even fully understood why. There's an old radio in his garage, an actual AM radio, that he keeps on when he's working. It doesn't need his data or his opinion or his reaction to a stranger's post about their morning matcha. It just plays music from a transmitter somewhere he'll never visit, by people he'll never meet, and asks nothing in return. He is always like that deal. Psychologists who study digital behavior have a concept called the audience effect, the documented tendency for people to perform differently when they know they're being observed. It's not dishonesty exactly, it's just the automatic recalibration that happens when the watching is built in. And social media is watching built into the architecture. Every platform is, at its core, a stage. Some people thrive on stages. Marcus does not. His particular wiring, formed across a childhood where he learned to read a room quietly rather than command it, treats stages as expensive, energy out, not energy in. He grew up in a house where you didn't announce your feelings, you managed them. Where you showed up for people not by posting about showing up, but by actually showing up, usually with tools. His father fixed the neighbor's fence after the ice storm of '79 and never mentioned it again. Not to the neighbor, not to anyone. The fence got fixed. That was the entire communication. Marcus filed that away somewhere deep, and it became a template for what caring looks like without an audience. which is not to say he doesn't communicate. He texts, sometimes even in whole sentences. He answers his phone, most of the time, from numbers he recognizes. He will spend 4 hours in a hardware store with a friend, not talking much, occasionally pointing at things, and consider that one of the better afternoons he's had in months. The communication is real. It just doesn't travel through platforms designed to make you feel like you have 700 friends when what you have is 700 acquaintances who have collectively agreed to applaud each other's lunch choices. There's a study worth knowing here, from researchers at the University of Pittsburgh, which found that the more time young adults spent on social media, the more likely they were to report feeling socially isolated. The platforms designed to connect people were producing, at scale, a particular kind of loneliness, a loneliness that comes from constant exposure to curated performance without the friction of real contact. Marcus didn't read the study. He didn't need to. He reached the same conclusion in roughly 2012, scrolling past his third consecutive post from someone he'd met once at a Christmas party, making a very serious face about a political event they'd probably heard about that morning. He closed the app and didn't open it again for 9 months. When he finally checked back in, nothing important had been said. He closed it again. This is not unusual for men of his generation. The research on digital engagement across age cohorts shows a consistent pattern. Gen X men, particularly those who spent their teens in the pre-internet era, tend to maintain an arm's-length relationship with social platforms that younger users find baffling. The bafflement is mutual. Marcus is not performing he's just absent, in the way that most of human history was absent from mediums that didn't exist yet, and in the way that not everything that gets invented needs to be adopted by every person who encounters it. His friend Danny has a different strategy. Danny posts thoughtfully and not too often, photographs of things he's actually made with his hands, a rebuilt carburetor, a section of dry stone wall, a pie that came out better than expected. Danny uses Instagram the way a craftsman uses a display shelf, not for vanity, but to say, "This happened, I was here. Someone else might find this useful or interesting." Marcus respects this. He just can't do it himself. The impulse doesn't fire. When he finishes a job, his first thought is not documentation. His first thought is the next problem. The ceramic doesn't go on the shelf, it goes into service. 3 types of Gen X men handle this silence differently, and it's worth naming them because they look identical from the outside and are not. The first is the man who genuinely doesn't think about it. He's not making a statement. He's not protecting anything. Social media simply doesn't occur to him the way a hammer doesn't occur to you when you need a spoon. Different tool for a different task, and this is not a task he's running. He probably uses email. He texts. He's on some platform he joined for a specific reason, probably related to a hobby, and he checks it once a week when he remembers. He has no opinions about people who post constantly. They are not him. He is not them. Case closed. Where are his keys? The second is the man who left. He was on these platforms. He participated. He found the experience of watching his inner life flatten into content over a period of months or years, and then quietly deactivated his accounts with the same energy he'd bring to canceling a subscription that wasn't delivering what it promised. No announcement, no farewell post. He just stopped. If you ask him about it, he'll give you a specific date or event that triggered the decision, and the story will be delivered with the dry brevity of a man who has already done the work of figuring out that what he lost by leaving was less than what he'd been losing by staying. The third is the man who never joined, and he is the most interesting of the 3. He watched the entire phenomenon from the outside, observed what it did to people he knew, made an early calculation, and never bought the ticket. These men often have the sharpest read on what platforms actually do to the people who use them, because they saw the before and after without ever being inside the experiment. They watched friends become more anxious, more performative, more interested in the reaction to the experience than in the experience itself. They watched people reach for their phones at the end of something genuinely good, as though the good thing hadn't quite happened until it had been documented and distributed. They found this observation both fascinating and sad in the way that Marcus finds most human behavior fascinating and sad, which is to say, with affection and without judgment, mostly. Marcus is the third type, and he noticed something early that took the platforms themselves years to even acknowledge. The ratio was off. He's always been a man who thinks in systems. When a system's inputs and outputs don't balance, something is being extracted somewhere. Social media platforms were extracting attention that cost something real to produce, and returning what exactly? Reactions, metrics, the sensation of being seen by people who weren't actually looking at him. They were looking at the version he'd manufactured for their consumption. He tried to picture posting his work and couldn't make it feel like anything other than a small, inexplicable embarrassment. Not because his work wasn't good, because the posting itself felt like asking strangers to validate something that didn't need validation. The crawl space was rewired correctly. He knew it was rewired correctly. He could feel the clean current in the dark. This is where the psychology gets more complicated, and it's the part we promised we'd return to. Because there is a shadow side here that Marcus doesn't always acknowledge. And the researchers who studied this specific pattern in Gen X men are pretty consistent about what it is. The same wiring that makes him immune to the performance economy also makes him hard to reach. The same formation that taught him caring without audience can calcify, over years, into something that looks like caring but operates mostly in solitude. A man who communicates exclusively through action and presence is extraordinarily good at showing up when the situation calls for it. He is considerably less good at being found when the situation doesn't demand urgency. He doesn't post. He doesn't check in. He doesn't send the kind of low-stakes digital signal that tells people you're still there, still thinking of them, still in the world. His silence is principled. But principle and isolation can start to look the same, from the outside of a very quiet house. There's a finding from longitudinal research on midlife men that keeps showing up in different studies under different methodologies. Men who reduce their digital presence tend to report higher satisfaction with their time and lower anxiety about social comparison. That part makes sense. But the same men, when tracked over time, show higher rates of social network shrinkage. The people they don't send the small signals to drift, not from malice, but from the natural tendency of connection to need occasional maintenance. And a man who maintains machines with great discipline and doesn't think of relationships as machines can look up at 53 and notice that his address book has quietly thinned. Marcus knows this. He doesn't say he knows it, because saying things you know about yourself that make you look vulnerable is also not really in his operating manual. But he knows. There's a guy from his 20s, Kenny, who he worked with for 3 years on a project that mattered to both of them. Kenny moved to another city. Marcus lost the thread. Not because he stopped caring about Kenny, because caring about Kenny without a reason to contact him, without a shared project or a crisis or a concrete thing to do, was like writing a letter with no envelope and no address. He typed it, but couldn't figure out where to send it. If there were a platform where he could just see that Kenny was fine, still working on things, still himself, without having to perform a friendship across a distance, Marcus might use it. Not to post, just to know. That's the thing nobody built for men like him. A system for maintaining awareness without requiring production. Every platform asks you to produce something. Marcus has always preferred building to broadcasting. And here is where the cost becomes visible, if you know where to look. The data on social isolation in men over 50 is not ambiguous. Loneliness in this demographic is measurably associated with accelerated cognitive decline, elevated cardiovascular risk, and the cluster of outcomes that researchers describe in language that would not be welcome at a dinner table. The men who land in those statistics are not, in most cases, men who wanted to be isolated. They are men who built a life organized around self-sufficiency and woke up at some point to discover that self-sufficiency, taken far enough, is a kind of loneliness that doesn't show up on any self-report measure because the man reporting doesn't have language for it. He just says he's fine. He's always fine. Fine is the default setting that boots up when someone asks how he's doing, and he doesn't think the question is serious enough for a real answer. Marcus is not there. Marcus has people. But he can feel the edges of the architecture he's built, the way a structural engineer can feel the load tolerance in a beam he didn't design. He knows which connections are weight-bearing and which are cosmetic, and he also knows, with the particular clarity of a man who thinks in systems, that you don't let weight-bearing components go uninspected for too long. He called his brother last spring, not for a reason, not because anything was wrong or needed to be fixed. He just called, which for Marcus is roughly the equivalent of another man sending a handwritten letter sealed in wax. His brother picked up after 2 rings, said nothing for a moment, then said, "You okay?" Because that's the only explanation his brother could generate for an unprompted call in the middle of a Thursday afternoon. Marcus said yes. He said he was just checking in. His brother said, "Okay." They talked for 11 minutes about a bridge project Marcus had read about their father's truck, which neither of them had gotten around to selling, about absolutely nothing of consequence. When Marcus hung up, he sat in his car for a moment in the parking lot of a hardware store and noticed that something had shifted slightly in a direction he couldn't name. That's the whole move. He already knows how to make it. He just needs to make it more often, and not only for reasons that would hold up in a project proposal. If this landed somewhere real for you, leave a comment below. Not a reaction, an actual comment. 2 sentences about someone you haven't contacted in longer than you meant to. That's enough. You don't have to post about it. The phone on Marcus's workbench buzzes sometimes with messages he's set to receive from the people who actually know him. The apps are still installed. He checked the weather this morning. A bill came through digital. He is technically present in the digital world in the minimum way required to function in it. What he is not present in is the performance of presence. And the older he gets, the more he suspects that is a distinction worth protecting, while also making sure, quietly, invisibly, in the way he does everything that actually matters to him, that the people he would show up for still know where to find him when they need him to. The crawl space is still wired correctly. He knows it. The dark is full of clean current. That's enough. For now, that's enough.